The town of Ravenbrook had a reputation for being quiet, almost too quiet. Its cobblestone streets wound past old brick buildings. Their windows shuttered early in the evening. Locals said life there was predictable. The same faces at the cafe, the same merchants at the market, and the same families living in houses passed down for generations. Outsiders rarely visited, and when they did, they were noticed immediately. On a misty autumn morning, a stranger walked into Ravenbrook's central square. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered coat that had seen too many roads and storms. His name was Marcus Hale, though few would learn it right away. He carried himself like someone who had traveled far and endured much, yet his eyes betrayed a certain wariness, the look of a man used to being questioned wherever he went. At the market, townsfolk exchanged whispers as Marcus passed. Some lowered their voices, others openly stared. The butcher muttered something about drifters, while the baker's apprentice smirked as if the newcomer's very presence was suspicious. Marcus ignored them all, focusing instead on buying bread and a small packet of dried meat. What caught everyone off guard, however, was not Marcus's appearance but the way he froze when he noticed an elderly woman struggling with her groceries. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, steadying her bags before they spilled onto the muddy cobblestones. The woman blinked in surprise, then offered a quiet thank you. But the act of kindness did little to soften the wary looks directed his way. Among the crowd, two uniformed officers leaned against the wall of the post office. Officer Kendrick, young and brash, nudged his partner. "Look at him," he muttered. "Doesn't belong here." His partner, Officer Riley, older and more reserved, studied Marcus carefully. "Or maybe he's just passing through. Not every stranger is a threat." But Kendrick shook his head, his suspicion already hardened. In a town like this, they're always hiding something. By late afternoon, Marcus had checked into the small inn at the edge of town. The innkeeper, a wiry man with thinning hair, barely looked up as Marcus signed the guest book. Yet word of his arrival spread quickly, carried from porch to porch, store to store. By nightfall, everyone knew Ravenbrook had a new face. What Marcus didn't know was that his presence would stir up more than gossip. Old tensions, buried secrets, and hidden biases were waiting just beneath the surface of this quiet town. And by choosing Ravenbrook, whether by chance or fate, Marcus was about to uncover truths no one else dared speak aloud. For now, though, he ate his bread in silence, staring out the inn's window as the fog rolled in thicker. Somewhere deep inside, he felt the unease he had carried for years tighten in his chest. He was used to being the outsider. What he didn't yet realize was that Ravenbrook was a place where outsiders rarely walked away unchanged. The next morning, Ravenbrook was already alive with routine. Shopkeepers raised their shutters, children skipped along the cobblestones on their way to lessons, and neighbors paused on porches to gossip over steaming cups of coffee. Life in Ravenbrook thrived on familiarity, and Marcus Hale was the one thing that didn't fit. When Marcus stepped out of the inn, adjusting the collar of his coat, conversations in the square slowed. Eyes followed him as if he carried trouble stitched into the seams of his clothes. He ignored the stares, walking toward the general store. The smell of fresh bread floated in the air, but so did something sharper, the tension of suspicion. By the time Marcus reached the store steps, Officers Kendrick and Riley were waiting. Kendrick pushed off the wall with a smirk, his hand resting casually near his belt. Riley stood beside him, less aggressive, but his gaze no less sharp. "Morning," Kendrick said, blocking Marcus's path. "Funny. Don't remember seeing you around before yesterday." Marcus's expression stayed neutral. "I arrived last night, just passing through." "Passing through, huh?" Kendrick's tone dripped with disbelief. "Folks like you don't usually stop in Ravenbrook. What's your business here?" Marcus shifted his weight, keeping his voice calm. "I needed a place to rest. That's all." But Kendrick wasn't satisfied. He stepped closer, his posture deliberately confrontational. "We've had problems with drifters before. Theft, fights, people thinking they can stir up trouble. And I don't like the look of you." Behind them, curious townsfolk began to gather. The butcher wiped his hands on his apron as he leaned against his doorway. A few mothers pulled their children closer, whispering as if Marcus were already guilty of something. Riley finally spoke, his tone steadier. "Kendrick, maybe we should." But Kendrick cut him off.
No.
"I want answers." He jabbed a finger at Marcus's chest. "Who are you, really? What are you hiding?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He had faced worse than this, checkpoints in war zones, interrogations in foreign countries, but something about Kendrick's arrogance struck deeper. He could feel the judgment in every pair of eyes watching, the silent verdict being drawn before he'd even spoken. "I told you," Marcus said evenly. "I'm here to rest. That's it." Kendrick let out a short laugh, loud enough for the crowd. "Rest? In a town like this? No, you've got secrets. I can see it written all over you." The tension was suffocating now. Riley shifted uncomfortably but didn't intervene. The townsfolk leaned closer, whispering, speculating. Marcus stood still, every instinct telling him to walk away, but he also knew retreat would only feed their assumptions. Finally, Marcus spoke again, his voice low but firm. "Careful, officer. Judging a man without proof says more about you than it does about me." The crowd stirred at his words, a ripple of surprise passing through them. Kendrick's smirk faltered. His pride stung in front of witnesses. And in that moment, Marcus realized something. This wasn't just suspicion. It was the beginning of a battle he hadn't chosen, but one Ravenbrook was determined to drag him into. By the third day, the atmosphere in Ravenbrook had shifted from curiosity to hostility. Marcus couldn't take a step through the market without whispers trailing him like shadows. "Who is he really?" they muttered. "What's he hiding?" Others speculated wildly. A fugitive, a deserter, someone running from a crime. Marcus tried to keep his head down. He bought only what he needed, paid in exact change, and spoke to no one. But suspicion grew like fire feeding on dry wood. And Officer Kendrick, eager to fan the flames, saw his chance to corner Marcus again. That afternoon, Kendrick strode into the inn with Riley trailing reluctantly behind. They found Marcus seated near the window, a worn book open in his hands. "Enjoying your stay?" Kendrick asked loudly, making sure the innkeeper and the few guests present could hear. Marcus closed the book slowly. "It's quiet here. I like quiet." Kendrick leaned closer, his smirk sharp. "Too quiet, maybe. Folks are starting to wonder why a man like you wants to hide in a place like this." Marcus studied him, the calm in his eyes unsettling Kendrick more than anger would have. "I'm not hiding," the officer scoffed. "Then you won't mind showing us some identification." Riley shifted uneasily but said nothing. Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He placed it on the table, flipping it open with deliberate care. Inside was an official badge, gold, engraved, gleaming in the lamplight. The innkeeper gasped. Riley's eyes widened. Even Kendrick, who had been ready to sneer, froze in place. It was a federal badge. Marcus's voice remained calm, though steel edged each word. "My name is Marcus Hale, federal investigator, Department of Justice. I'm here on assignment." The room went silent. The innkeeper, who had been muttering doubts about Marcus since his arrival, now stared at him with open-mouthed shock. The other guests whispered, their earlier suspicions dissolving into stunned disbelief. Kendrick's smirk vanished. His face flushed as realization struck. He hadn't been humiliating a drifter. He'd been antagonizing a federal officer, one who could dismantle his career with a single report. Marcus stood slowly, tucking the badge away. He looked Kendrick in the eye. "You've judged me from the moment I arrived. You wanted to make a spectacle to prove you had power. But all you've proven is your arrogance." Kendrick tried to recover, stammering, "Why would someone like you be here? Ravenbrook doesn't." Marcus cut him off. "Ravenbrook is part of my jurisdiction. There are matters here that require federal attention. And until my work is done, I expect the respect any citizen deserves, especially from those who wear a badge." The words hit harder than a shout. Kendrick stepped back, his bravado shattered. Riley lowered his gaze, shame written across his face. And for the first time since he'd arrived, Marcus felt the weight of suspicion shift. The truth had surfaced, and Ravenbrook would never look at him the same way again. The revelation of Marcus's true identity spread through Ravenbrook faster than gossip ever had. By evening, the townsfolk who once whispered suspicion now exchanged stunned conversations over dinner tables and shop counters. The drifter they had treated with disdain was in fact a federal investigator, a man tasked with upholding the very laws they claimed to respect. At the precinct, the fallout was immediate. Officer Riley submitted a formal statement acknowledging Kendrick's behavior, admitting he had stood by instead of stepping in. Kendrick, however, doubled down, insisting he had only been protecting the community. His excuses fell flat. The chief of police, grim-faced, announced that Kendrick was suspended pending review. Marcus wasn't interested in revenge, but he knew accountability mattered. Authority means responsibility, he told the chief plainly. If your officers abuse their position, the whole town suffers. The words carried weight, especially with reporters now circling Ravenbrook after catching wind of the incident. The community, once quick to cast judgment, began to shift. Some neighbors offered quiet apologies when Marcus passed, embarrassed by their earlier stares. The veteran with the market stall approached him one morning, extending a hand. "Didn't know who you were," the man admitted. "But even if you hadn't been an investigator, you didn't deserve what they did." Marcus accepted the handshake, though his expression remained guarded. "Respect shouldn't depend on titles," he replied. "It should be given freely to everyone." The words struck deeper than any badge could. They lingered in the minds of those who had watched the confrontation in silence. Parents repeated them to their children. Teachers used the incident as a lesson in prejudice during morning classes. Slowly, Ravenbrook began to reckon with its tendency to judge outsiders before knowing them. As for Marcus, his investigation, the quiet assignment that had first brought him there, was completed within weeks. But when the time came to leave, the atmosphere was different. Instead of suspicion, there was acknowledgement. Instead of stares, there were nods of respect. On his last day, as he packed his bag at the inn, the innkeeper stopped by. Her tone was softer now, tinged with regret. "You taught us something, Mr. Hale," she said. "We thought we were protecting our little town. Turns out we were only protecting our own fears." Marcus offered a small smile, shouldering his coat. "Fear makes people blind, but truth has a way of opening eyes." He left Ravenbrook the way he had arrived, quietly, without ceremony. Yet his presence lingered long after his departure. The story of the federal officer mistaken for a drifter became a tale retold in Ravenbrook, not as gossip, but as a reminder. A reminder that respect is not earned by suspicion, but deserved by humanity. And as Marcus disappeared down the road into the misty horizon, Ravenbrook stood changed, its people carrying with them the lesson he had left behind.